Hello, everyone. Before we get started on this week's episode, just a quick word that YouTube, in all its infinite wisdom, has decided that some of the Die Party games are now not suitable for advertising. It doesn't mean a whole lot for the content. I'm not going to censor the videos in any way, but if you'd like to lend your support so that Die Party can continue to grow, please check out the Patreon or subscribe on the Twitch channel. Enjoy the episode. Hello everyone, welcome to a very special episode of Die Party LA at Night, I want to say a weekly Vampire the Masquerade role-playing game experience, but today's episode is very different because it is what I've playfully called the LA Confidential, which... basically, Wreckage is going to be giving us an exposition dump today, with a little bit of gamification added on for good measure. Welcome to that. Let's introduce everyone. Brian isn't with us today because of, human being related things. But Taxodamus, why don't you give yourself a quick introduction? Because I doubt much has changed since last time we talked, which was 2 days ago.
It's true. Not much has changed. Just life things going on, work and such. But I'm Tux. I'm here. Mondays I play Maria. Today I'm me, as we learn more about the like stuff going on with the Anarchs and everything. So I'm excited to learn more about them.
Maria.
Yeah, you'd be like Maria twice removed.
It'd be like Maria as if you were controlling her in a video game rather than a role-playing game.
Got it. Right.
You know how when you play GoldenEye on the Nintendo 64 and then James Bond does that little like pistol look around thing and then the camera zooms into your head? Yeah, you're doing that. That's what you're doing today. You're doing the pistol thing with Maria.
Got it. Okay. As long as I can have the golden gun.
Yeah, you got the golden gun.
Nice.
But you only get one bullet. That's how it works. And it doesn't work on vampires. Would the golden gun work on vampires?
Well, so the golden gun in the actual mythos of James Bond wasn't all that special. But then in the game, because it was narratively significant, they made it a one-shot, one-kill. But like in the mythos of James Bond, it's not a magic bullet or anything.
This is a gun made out of gold.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just a gun made out of gold. I think it controls something else, like it controls a bigger gun or something. I forget. I forget exactly what's going on, but it's not like a super weapon.
Got it.
Unless you're Jamis, and then there's a super weapon. I just want a moon laser. Speaking about moon lasers, let's introduce our storyteller for the evening, Mr. Dr. Wreckage. What up, sir? How's your face?
Hi everybody. Life's been pretty shit over here, but that doesn't mean that we can't have role-playing games. And boy, howdy, do we have a role-playing
spirit?
Boy, howdy, do we have a role-playing game for you tonight. So, this was originally pitched as potentially a drawing board episode, and there's a real good reason. The Los Angeles by Night splat book for Vampire the Masquerade was written at the height of Vampire the Masquerade, stuff, and also at the height of them not knowing quite how to, it's really old school. And more than that, more than any city in the World of Darkness canon, Los Angeles has one of the most complicated political structures, even though it's not Camarilla. And the reason is because we're gonna learn all about this today, because what is essentially happening narratively, other than fire in my city, what is essentially happening narratively is that you guys were at Elysium and you talked to people and you did Elysium, and now you've learned basically all of the basics, right? So
instead of like doing some weird like, here's what you could have learned during an episode, and maybe dancing around that fact, we're just gonna
tell you everything because you would learn all of this. Now, I did say that there was a bit of a gamification.
Will there be punch served at this mixer?
Both of you have an additional number, like, so you can ask questions as any time out of character, and I will answer them unless they're like secrets. Both of you, though, have opportunities to say, I want to know, you know, the rest of the story on that. I want to know the secret stuff. I want to know the rumor stuff. Like,
give me
I
that
want to
Szechuan sauce. You know what I mean?
I want the secret extra bonus double thing about that particular piece of information. Each of you have a number of those special questions equal to your charisma rating. Which,
what is my
since
charisma
neither of you are
rating?
in roll 20, I'll just tell you
No,
both.
I'm in roll.
I'm going in. I was gonna get on there so I can like take notes and stuff. Anyways,
My charisma
Right.
is 3. Okay, my charisma is actually pretty fucking high in comparison to.
I believe mine's also 3.
Yeah, you're
can't
both
go-
3.
Okay, good. So it can't. I mean, it could be 1 higher, but like it can't be that much higher. So it's not a 2 or a 1. So that's good. I'm not Braden, for crying out loud. You know what I'm saying? Like Braden's not here. You make all the Braden jokes you want. So
Yeah.
So, let's start with a brief recap about the history of how Los Angeles became the Anarch states, because it was originally owned by the Camarilla. The history that you'll be told is that basically as soon as there were white settlers on the West Coast, as far back as Spanish conquistadors, there have been vampires who have chosen to make these like remote locations their home. When they started to establish more sophisticated colonies, you know, the governors would often be ghouls or vampires. This was largely the state of affairs throughout the settling of America, basically. You know, new lands meant that European powers were getting their fingers into pies, and if European powers were getting their fingers into pies, then vampires were too. Eventually, United States revolts. And then a little further along, it starts to get this idea about manifest destiny, and it starts incorporating states further and further towards the coast into the United States. Just before this happens, a vampire, a young boy vampire, staggers into a ranch owned by a man named Don Sebastian Juan Dominguez.
Salvador.
This boy, who appeared to be 13 years old, happened to be a Toreador elder.
Sure.
That's the biggest oxymoron I've ever heard.
Well, the Toreador as a weakness become fixated and fascinated with individuals. So presumably someone higher up had become fixated on this 13-year-old boy, sired him, and now there's a Toreador elder who's a 13-year-old boy. Nobody knows the rest of the story after that, except for that Don Sebastian Juan Dominguez sheltered him in his ranch, and as repayment was given the gift of immortality. And since he was already a land-owning, influential member of the community, Don Sebastian basically became the de facto prince of Los Angeles and California to a larger extent after the United States acquired California. The Toreador blood that becomes so fascinated with human things and arts and etc. is essentially the reason that Los Angeles became the city that it is today. It was the influence of Don Sebastian that laid the groundwork for Hollywood to exist. And, you know, with Hollywood comes Walt Disney and Disney World. So California is made that way in the image of Don Sebastian. Don Sebastian remains the prince all the way up until just around World War II. Because just around World War II, a new kid shows up on the block. This new kid is named Jeremy McNeil.
Hey, we know him.
Is the other one Don Salvador?
He's coming up.
Okay.
It's different. Okay.
There's Don Sebastian, who's the current prince, and Don Salvador is coming up in the story. James McNeil had to flee to the western coast because he was preaching too much, anarchy stuff in New England. And his arrival in LA immediately started to make waves. The story that you'll hear is that Don Sebastian had Jeremy seized and savagely beaten, which was sort of against even his own rules. He had no reason to do it. He did it just because he was a dissenter. The response to this was the spark that ignited the revolution, because Jeremy limped away from this attempt on his life and ran into Salvador Garcia, Don Salvador, who was legitimately an anarch, and had come to LA specifically because Jeremy had been starting to talk about anarch things, and that there was a growing anarch movement in LA as a result. The Anarchs were absolutely pissed that Jeremy had been beaten up just for being an anarch, as you would be. But rather than immediately acting on it like the Brujas that make up most of the Anarchs would have wanted, it was Salvador and Jeremy who corralled the Anarchs and insisted on waiting, making a plan. They organized Anarchs into hit squads. They started watching the comings and goings of the Primogens and the important people that make up a Camarilla vampire governmental structure. Finally, in 1944, the actual revolt happened. Anarchs that were heavily armed, hit their targets. There was chaos, it was completely unexpected. They struck when the iron was hot, so to speak. The revolt itself has become sort of a mythos and legend. One of the main legends that you will be told is how Don Salvador single-handedly defeated Don Sebastian, who was holed up in his manse with all of his guards. And the legend goes that Don Salvador went in there, killed everybody himself, and took Don Sebastian's head.
In Mortal Kombat.
Kind of.
He threw the glove on the ground, and he was like, "Bitch, no more."
And that's one of those legendary encounters. Another legend of the revolt was...
So was this like open warfare? You say revolt, like it means like there were sides clashing.
So there were the Camarilla, and then there were the Anarchs. The Camarilla were in charge. The Anarchs had been a growing movement in LA for so long. Finally, with the illegal beating of McNeil, who was the Che Guevara of this revolution. He was the charismatic leader. That was the spark that ignited it. But rather than just immediately running out and beating up some cams, which is what the Anarchs would have done, McNeil and Salvador organized them into hit squads, started watching targets, and then a few weeks later, sent them all out at once to just wipe out the Camarilla, as opposed to other Anarch revolts, which ended up just being beating up a bunch of people and killing some of them, and then now we demand more rights. And instead, that's not what happens. They just get cracked down on.
So they literally did a French Revolution and just took out everyone at once, sort of thing.
In one night. Another important legend that you're going to learn is that there was a squad that was sent to go into the Hollywood Hills, Malibu area, right? Like the ritzy end of town.
Uh-huh.
They were the hit squad for that area. There were a lot of important vampires in that area. As they were driving into the hills, a rough-looking woman flagged down the car, told them to turn back. We have done your work for you. Gaia has reclaimed her own, and there are no vampires in the hills tonight, nor will there ever be again. Go and do not return.
Wait, who said that? Sorry?
Just a lady in the street. The vampires were about to object when the woman dropped to all fours and turned into a wolf. And trotted off into the underbrush. It was then that they realized that they were hearing a cacophony of growls from all around them. The kindred decided to look into the situation later and left as quickly as possible. Subsequent and very cautious investigation proved that the Lupin had told the truth. The werewolves had attacked Malibu, and not a single vampire had survived.
Was there a big staying power in Malibu, or is it just a bunch of dudes just living there?
It was a lot of important vampires, like Toreador elders and stuff. It was one of their main hits was we got to go take the hills. The hills are where the ritzy and powerful vampires are.
So one of the standing things is you don't go
into the Hollywood Hills in Malibu.
To the hills. Uh-huh.
Right. Yeah. Because besides being beautiful, apparently also they are sacred lands of the werewolves. Nobody knows how the werewolves knew that the Anarch revolt was happening that night. But it was they struck at the exact right time.
Happy accident.
That maybe, but the lady also knew to stop a group of armed vampires coming in and told them, "We've done your work for you."
Have there been any attempts to not be butting heads with the werewolves and being hey, you're werewolves, we're vampires. Let's
the werewolves won't have it. The werewolves full stop will not talk to vampires. If you ask a little deeper, this doesn't take your question or anything. You'll get the general consensus by vampires is that if you're interacting with a werewolf, the werewolf is disgusted with you. You're very no matter how you present yourself, no matter how you approach them, no matter how you set up the conversation, the werewolf will just be period full stop disgusted with you. And in that way, other than absolute necessity, werewolves have never interacted with vampires, except for to kill them. But then again, they also don't just wantonly kill vampires. So yeah, then all the important people in the Camarilla were dead. People wanted to make McNeil the prince of a new Anarch state, but he did the George Washington thing of like, I did not unseat a prince to become a prince. Stuff like that. The idea was, well, somebody will hand you a pamphlet, and let me see if I can find it online because it's a little long, and maybe you could read it yourself. Hey, here it is. So they wrote a constitution. They wrote a constitution for all vampires everywhere, but really just a constitution for the folks. The LA. It's really just a constitution for the free states. For those at home, it's got a few points. We declare ourselves to be free and independent, owing allegiance to no creature and no organization. We declare our ability to rule ourselves with no prince, no primogen, and no other ruler other than those we choose for ourselves. We declare our kinship with oppressed kindred everywhere and offer a home to all kindred of all generations and clans who will agree to dwell in harmony with us.
Yeah.
We further accept our responsibility to our oppressed brothers and sisters everywhere and pledge to assist them at all times and in all places in their own struggle for the freedom that we declare to be the birthright of all kindred from now until the end of time. We recognize our responsibility to maintain the Masquerade, and we pledge to protect and defend it. We establish the status perfectus and recognize its duty to all kindred.
So why were they so? If that's the case, then why were they so gung ho about putting our heads on platters the moment we showed up? I get that we were
So Sabbat is the reason. If you had been thought of as Camarilla spies potentially, that's one thing, right? Like, Camarilla spies can show up in LA, claim to be an Anarch, and even if people are suspicious, they will give them all the rights and privileges of Anarchs and treat them as their brothers. And maybe they will eye them cautiously and keep an eye on them.
So that's like Toreador and some other shit like that, then.
Ventru, most Malkavians are Camarilla. The point is, Sabbat are an entirely different beast because the Sabbat no longer... The Sabbat are evil. Like, they're comically evil in this setting. They actually go through rites and rituals to erase all of their standing morality and become, like, literally dark and evil Sith.
Yeah, they take those paths and, like, all the... they're called paths, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the point is, when it was possible that you were Sabbat spies, that's why it sort of was like... They didn't kill you right away because of this doctrine. They gave you a chance. It's just that ultimately, if you failed, if they assumed you were spies, you would have to be killed because the Sabbat can't convert out of the Sabbat. It just never happens. Like, they've been brainwashed and mind controlled so much that a conversion out of the Sabbat is incredibly rare. If you actually ask somebody, like, after you're handed this, then why the fuck are we giving the ring around? They'll tell you that, and then they'll also say there are rumors of Sabbat who've been able to convert to Anarchy or to Camarilla, but, there's rumors of everything.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess that makes sense.
Okay.
So out of curiosity, like, you mentioned that there were paths.
Those are morality paths that people can do to alter their humanity and the roles they have to make for that.
Is that like a required thing? Like if a Sombra doesn't do that, is it weird?
You're fine.
Okay, just saying.
It just don't like it's the paths are just there so that you can play Sabbat campaigns, and Sabbat campaigns involve torture and the big R word,
being an evil fucker.
Like and so if you use the standard humanity system, you would just lose your character after a couple of sessions. So there are paths where your morality is different.
Mm-hmm.
So we move on to the final little bit of history that'll bring us into the real meat of this episode, and that is the rise of the gangs. The blueprint for the way of life in LA was on the table, and everybody is supposed to have all these rights. But it turns out that vampires are inherently territorial, and that's a problem when you're trying to do like an anarchy communism thing. Without McNeil being willing to step up as a single leader and therefore go against the precepts of anarchy in the first place, gangs start to form. The leaders of the gangs end up being called barons, and the territory that they control are called baronies.
Okay, so that's okay. All right, so they're not. I thought they were like, I own all of this land, like, but it's just a gang thing, right? Okay, yeah.
Well, it is and it isn't. It is their vampiric territory, and vampiric territory supersedes sort of gang territory. These gangs are made up of kindred. It's but it is much more akin to warring gangs than to say like warring duchies or something. In this state of like constant war and taking each other's territories, the Sabbat saw an opportunity to take Los Angeles. And this is called the Siege of LA. And you may have heard of the Rodney King riots. That was a cover for the Sabbat trying to take over LA, because when the Sabbat come into town, to humans, it's almost like this town is an open riot, breaking windows and burning buildings down and all of this, blah, 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 blah.
Fucking World of Darkness.
Yeah. Like, for example, the recent, like, very, very, very hardcore riots in Ferguson, if they were still writing the World of Darkness canon, they would say the Sabbat were trying to take over that town. Yeah, I know. It's basically anytime riots turn violent and widespread as opposed to peaceful, that the assumption in the World of Darkness is that the Sabbat turned those riots violent.
Because there could be literally no other reason people would get violent.
I mean, it's World of Darkness, right?
Right. Everything is done.
I just like, hey, so you know that whole thing about cops killing people of color? Let's take that and make it about our vampire shit.
I mean, that happens in Cyberpunk. It happens in Shadowrun. I mean, it's not that far removed.
Yeah, they do take historical crappy shit. Like, I mean, do you want me to tell you?
It happens in Hollow Earth. I mean, like...
It happens... I'm not saying it's good.
Indiana Jones did it, like...
I mean, do you want to hear about how World War II was all vampires, too?
No, I don't. I really don't.
No, you don't.
Do you want to hear how the French Revolution was apparently run by the Senators? Like, let's do it, man. World of Darkness is a great.
In the aftermath of this open war between the Anarchs and the Sabbat, both sides had really heavy casualties, and the Anarchs almost didn't survive. This was almost the early death of the Anarch state. It was almost like the War of 1812 for America, right? Like, we've established our thing, but then we can't actually keep it. And that's really the catalyst that sort of changed the landscape. Yes, there are still barons who control baronies, but open, like, war to claim each other's territories is now just off the table. Like, because it made them so weak, they weren't able to fight off the Sabbat on a unified front. They had so many casualties. It's only until just now, when you're coming into the story, that the Anarchs have started to build back up into a stable state. And that's also part of the reason why they were extra, extra paranoid when all of a sudden some Sabbat show up. So as it is now,
Man, the fucking Game of Radke's like, I'm curious how they started Vietnam. Like, fuck, man. Can you imagine that story? That would be super cool. Yeah, I don't know. That's a cool World of Darkness story. Like fighting the
Well,
Viet
the Cold
Cong
War.
werewolves as fucking like supernaturals in like.
I mean, Vietnam was a proxy war with mortals as the only. But the Cold War itself was, of course, something that vampires were doing for the sake of other vampires.
Russian vampire spies.
In particular, do you know the old folklore figure Baba Yaga?
Yeah.
She's a vampire. She's real, and she
Hang on, which statement is true?
She's a vampire. She's real, and she was the one who put up the Iron Curtain, but not the media Iron Curtain of mortals. She put up a magical Iron Curtain around Russia that prevented anybody with like oracle powers or anything from seeing into communist Russia and its controlled territories.
Can we just like have a one-off where we play this shit?
And Baba Yaga was so powerful and her Iron Curtain so impenetrable that in the week of nightmares when the Ravnos ate each other, all the Ravnos in Russia were not affected.
Jesus.
Because her barrier was impenetrable even by the effects of the antediluvian of the Ravnos.
Fuck.
And then she gets killed by a little girl in one of the stories, and it's the stupidest fucking thing ever. And it's like, God damn it. Like, Baba Yaga was so cool.
You know what it was? It's because the Polish ripped down the Iron Curtain, and then she's like, fuck, I didn't expect the Polish, you know? Like,
Baba Yaga was Polish. For whatever reason, she's like, yeah, whatever.
She put up the Iron Curtain in Russia and she was Polish. Come on, guys. What are you doing?
So basically, this puts us in a position where we are now, which is that the baronies are largely established, and while you can claim other people's territories and take it, it's like you can't just ride up in your cars and beat them to death and take their stuff, because it's not... It's becoming increasingly like Camarilla-style hidden power plays if you want new territory. So now we're going to talk about the baronies. The barony of the Angels is one of those baronies. The city of Los Angeles itself is divided into several baronies. There is a south-central Los Angeles barony, which is controlled by Muhammad al-Muslim and his Crips sons. El Hermandad controls East L.A., Louis Fortier oversees West Los Angeles and from his estate in Beverly Hills. Few vampires live in eastern San Fernando Valley, but many travel there at night to feed. But downtown Hollywood and the Hollywood Hills that you're allowed to be in are what most kindred think of when they think of Los Angeles. And this area is called the Barony of the Angels. And it is a legit free state where anybody can come and feed. Jeremy McNeil is the one who makes it that way. This is where the taste is. This is where like all the public land of the Anarch free states is. This is why the boarding houses are in here. And it's the strength and influence of McNeil that keeps it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Bordered as he is on all sides by otherwise ambitious barons who have very strong opinions and would probably rather control the barony of the Angels.
So is Barony of an Angels like the name of a gang or some shit?
No, it means Barony of the Angels is in Los Angeles, the city of angels.
Oh, right. I'm sorry.
So it's the Barony of LA, and it's the one where everybody is doing most of the public stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have all of the like suburbs and like sister cities of Los Angeles, the things that
like
are
Orange
tacked on.
County sort of thing.
Yeah. So we're going to go through those as well. The first one is Griffith Park. It's home to the Los Angeles Zoo. Like it has the largest city park in the world, apparently. These are just things that the actual thing is telling me. Right now, Griffith Park is not anybody's barony because there are rumors that werewolves have moved into the actual park. There's the Simi Valley Barony, which was a very small, sort of cozy, welcoming group of vampires that you may recognize as the people that you avenged in episode 1 because Simi Valley had been invaded by a very small pack of Sabbat bikers and its original inhabitants killed. Simi Valley, it's a dive along a truck stop, so nobody's really. Their group was small enough that it was perfect for them, and now they're dead, and nobody else really wants it. Is basically what's happening up there. Santa Clarita. It's held by a young vampire couple named Walter and Millie Gaspars.
Are they at this thing?
No, but they're known about. They literally think they're the only vampires in the world. Nobody's gone to tell them that they aren't. It's a small little place off in the way. So
is it just like someone's fucking like laugh track? Like it's like I've been watching these guys for 3 centuries and they just crack me up, man. Like is that what it's like? Do they not go for like? Do they not go to the shopping center? They're just like, I'm gonna go get some milk.
They're farmers, and they live in a little farmhouse off in this area near LA where there's farmland and sort of a farmy area. And, there aren't a lot of people nearby, but they go and they feed on them.
Okay, I refuse to believe that they're a farmer and no one has noticed that they don't farm. I refuse.
I think they still do. It's kind of the thing.
How can they farm if it's just during the night? That's fucking impossible.
You could do all farming at night.
No, you can't.
Yeah, because the plants need the sun during the day, but that happens regardless. If you plant and till and harvest at night, it doesn't change anything.
Yeah, but that's so false. It's crazy. Because of the fact that you need to pesticides and shit like that while it's like during the day. Like, okay.
There's the San Fernando Valley. But
then again, it's World of Darkness, so maybe no one gives a fuck about like.
The San Fernando Valley is a large space. Some vampires make their haven there, but most vampires travel there to feed. Nobody has claimed it as a barony. It doesn't really have any places. Like an important feature that a barony must have is
Taco Bell.
Resources that vampires can control to exploit for their own ends.
Taco Bell.
You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Malibu, Topanga Canyon, and the surrounding Santa Monica Mountains are the Lupin territory that occurred during the story of the history.
Yep, that's the werewolves, yeah.
Yep. There's West Los Angeles, which is controlled by Louis Fortier. I don't know why we're going over this again. It's going through the whole list in order. That contains, for those of you unfamiliar with LA, famously Beverly Hills. So this Louis Fortier guy is the guy in charge of Beverly Hills. There's the Crips Sons Barony, which is again part of LA, but it's the south central part of LA. Then there's El Hermandad.
I'm not familiar with the actual I'm not familiar with LA at all, right?
Right.
So a lot of these things are just going. Yeah,
so the super poor area of sort of LA proper is controlled by the gang El Hermandad.
Right.
They are arch rivals with the Crips Sons. Then there's Covina. it's just a bunch of suburbs that's nearby. This is a great example of a barony without a baron. The area contains only 6 vampires who act independently, but usually support one another when called upon. Some of them have ties to members of El Hermandad, and would probably survive with that, or side with that in the event that a gang war broke out between the Crypt Sons and El Hermandad. El Hermandad and the Crypt Sons are the only 2 real groups that are like ready to go into a full gang war.
Why is some areas so sparse of vampires and no one with a gang has even considered touching them?
No resources.
Yeah, it's like what? Like it's like a lot of these places.
But if you're a gang, look, if you're a gang, if you're a biker gang or any gang, no resources, empty space literally means meth labs. Right? Like it's like the resources can be made. So I don't understand why there's like no conflicts over that stuff, but there's conflicts over like shitty parts of LA proper. You know, like, you know what I mean? Like that, it makes no sense to me.
Well, so the most important thing to a vampire is feeding, and the second most important thing is power over mortals. And
Meth
you're right
is
that
power over mortals in the biggest way that I could think. So,
well, you know, like if you start doing meth, then you start actually getting involved with the feds, and the feds aren't really tied down by any vampiric, like they don't just look the other way because vampires are peddling meth. It's one of those things where it's like, you corrupt the crop, you're not, you know, we're not, the masquerade at large isn't protecting you.
is it like is it like mafia? It's like, we don't do drugs, no drugs.
Also, there is like these people, especially in Los Angeles, these are Bruja anarchists, and they control turf for like blood and pride and stuff, not for money. This isn't a Ventru place. If it was Ventru, then absolutely someone would move in and just start doing, you know, meth labs for the sake of money and starting to control gangs and stuff. Whittier is a nearby town. They have a small they have a powerful but small group of vampires. They would also probably support El Hermandad. That's something that is that keeps coming up. It's like who would support who in this potential upcoming fight. Their Baron is Gloria Martinez. And we will learn about her in a little bit when we're going to go through NPCs.
Okay. Out of all of these, who are the most radical?
In what sense?
The definition of radical.
But like radical against what?
They're anarchs, right? So,
You know, who are the most anarchic anarchies?
yeah.
Anarchists?
Yeah.
Well, there are some people who've moved in called Bruja idealists. And they're like a group of 4 or 5 philosophers that have been traveling the world for who knows how long, and they're trying to like solve the vampiric condition on paper, like emotionally.
Like emotionally.
Well, like philosophically and emotionally, they're trying to like parse down what it means to be a vampire, and they've come to LA to study the Anarch states as a case study.
Right.
So they're currently being put up in here. Pasadena.
There's no like rebelling against the institution of the government in this area, right? That's what I meant by radical. Like,
well, no, the government, as far as vampires are concerned, is an anarchist government.
what I mean, like, you know, country and state, not like LA proper.
Nobody gives a shit about human governments, and there were plenty of talk in the Anarch states about going to liberate other places until the Sabbat attacked, and they nearly didn't survive.
Fucking Fire Nation clan, unbelievable.
Yeah, if the Sabbat or if the Anarchs build up again, that'll be a point where they start talking about like, who do we roll up on and liberate? You know what I mean? Like, that'll be one of the things that starts to come up. So Pasadena is controlled by
Good old Pasadena.
Right. So, Vera Vines. Vera Vines is a Ventru elder who survived the revolt and after the revolt claimed to be an Anarch the whole time. And has made every effort to maintain that appearance of loyalty to the Anarch cause. The Pasadena has only 4 vampires in it, and it's basically Vera's family. Her husband and, like, her 2 childer. Like, that's it. And since they don't control much and they're out of the way, nobody's asking questions. In Glendale, 2 twin sister vampires control a small barony from a rotting mansion that they live in. That's spooky.
It's fucking goth, yo.
So what happens when one day they wake up during the day because the roof fell in?
That can happen, and that shit's scary. Long Beach is a barony of 12 vampires who are surfers.
Wait, was that in? Where did Vampire the Masquerade take place? Because I remember there being vampire.
Bloodlines took place in.
Oh, sorry, Bloodlines. Yeah.
Like fakey town name is supposed to be LA.
Okay, because I remember there being surfers in that game.
Yep. And in the game, they're just there at the beach, but like in this, they control all of Long Beach, which is, Lakewood, Cerritos, Hawaii Gardens, Artesia, Paramount,
man, like I do.
Los Amitos, and Bellflower. Like all of those counties are Long Beach, and they control that entire area.
You need my permission to surf here, bruh.
Their Baron is Steve Booth.
Can we meet this guy? He sounds cool.
Steve Booth is like literally just a surfer bra who doesn't want to be a Baron, but all of the other surfers are way too lackadaisical to take up the mantle.
Hey man, I didn't choose this life. This life chose me. Okay.
And
now I want to be this guy. Fuck, man.
Barony of Torrance. Torrance is made up of mostly wealthy communities, Rancho Palos Verdes, Palos Verdes, etc., etc., etc. Very rich.
They have good pulled pork there.
The Baron is David Gouldad. Or
Gouldad?
Yeah, Gouldad.
Can I get a character name that screams vampire, please? How about Gouldad?
There are then there's Huntington Beach, which is another group of this is another barony of surfer dude vampires who would have joined with Steve Booth, except for their beach and his beach are cut off by the U.S. Naval Weapons Station at Seal Beach, so they can't like surf together, and that's the extent of why they're not.
I just imagine them longingly looking at each other across like a fucking war zone. It's like, bruh, Steve, bruh.
Then there is the Anaheim, which contains Disney World and Elysium, and the Baron is the.
Is it Disney World or Disneyland? Because I've had
Disneyland. Disney World's the one in Florida. Disneyland's the one in California, and it's smaller. The Baron is Tom Weaver.
That was the internet coming for your correction, by the way. Like, they're backing off, as you can hear, so it's good. It's fine.
It's all good.
I like how they don't give a shit too much about what Wreckage does, aside from the definition of which one of the Disneys it is.
Then there's Santa Ana, which is immediately on the other side of Anaheim. And Santa Ana, you'll remember, is controlled by a mysterious woman who calls herself Amethyst. She absolutely controls the other vampires in her Baron. molding them into an effective combat group for a purpose only she knows.
She's actually in the book. She's an actual NPC.
Yep.
Yet you've tied her to, as you put it, some chuckle fucks. Good job, Record.
San Diego County is another baron led by a vampire named Tara. It's a huge group of like 30 vampires. Fresno is another barony. It's farmlands. Like Fresno is a tiny city with farmlands all around it, and there's some gangrel who make up they make up their barony there because it's got plenty of open spaces for gangrel. So San Jose is less than 50 miles from San Francisco.
San Jose, been there too.
San Jose is a barony of battle-hardened Anarchs because they have had to fight off 2 attempts by the Prince of San Francisco to reclaim the area by force. That is to say, San Francisco is still controlled by a prince, a Camarilla prince. And those are all the named baronies. There are a bunch of other, like, for the GM's sake, here's a barony, here's a place where a barony can be, here's a place where a barony can be. You're dealing with a couple yourselves that are like, I put you in the middle of 2 warring baronies that are not mentioned in this book, for example.
Right.
So we're going to talk about some notable NPCs coming up here, but did anybody want to do any more probing questions for what they've heard so far?
Nope. Yeah, I'm more concerned. I'm more interested in like the actual people. So.
Yeah. So how big is this front on the San Francisco border?
It's pretty much just San Jose, like, because
like, is it an active like Camarilla coming in to take some shit?
Active is sort of a strong word. It's like the times that it's happened have been sort of out of nowhere, and then they fight them off, and then they go back, and then nothing happens for years, and then they'd attempt again all of a sudden, and it's that kind of all right, so let's talk about some NPCs. The book does it in order of clan. So let's talk about Amethyst.
What's this La Sombra one then?
Amethyst is a Bruja. What is publicly known about Amethyst is that she was once Camarilla. She was in a kidnapping attempt. She was very close with the prince of her city, so the Anarchs thought, we'll take her as a hostage and we'll get something for her in exchange. And the prince just laughed in their faces, and revealing that he had never cared about her at all. Yeah. At which point, being a Bruja, she immediately switched sides and dedicated her life to the Anarch cause. This was in Baltimore. She has never been back to actually seek revenge, but she took her Anarchs and moved them to California, and all anybody knows is that like the requisite of being in her gang is that you have to be a great fighter. Like she is always ready for open war. So that's what's openly known about Amethyst. It's worth pointing out that there are 3 pages on her. So
that's for an NPC. That's a fucking lot in a book. For a single one,
these are all pretty verbose.
Maybe it's pretty different in the Splat book, but like, yeah, that's crazy. All right.
This guy doesn't matter. This guy doesn't matter. So Steve Booth, that Baron, who's a surfer dude, he was a beach bum who drifted through the work week, just waiting for the weekend so he could grab his board and head for the beach to participate in his one great passion, surfing. nothing else matters as long as you can catch the waves.
What if I told you could do that for the rest of your life, like infinitely? And I'm like,
He was he was king of the beach from Point Dune to Point Conception, and all the chicks he wanted and all the beer he could drink, blah blah blah. He liked to say his favorite challenge was shooting through a pier. It's to shoot through the pier. It's really dangerous.
dude, have you ever tried to like surf in the moonlight?
Yeah, he tried to surf in the moonlight. His favorite place was a decrepit, abandoned stretch of rotting wood. He was drawn again and again to this spot, especially as the sun was settling down the horizon. Someone had apparently left the pier lights up, and Steve, reasoning that LA was in need of hold on a second. Especially as the sun was setting on the horizon. Reasoning that LA was in need of natural leaders like Steve, however, Marguerite, a vampire, sabotaged his surfing run. And when he fucking plowed into the pier, resurrected him. Like he was this charismatic natural leader of all these surfers. So she was like, this is perfect. We'll get him and then everything will be great.
Dude, let me just bat on your neck real quick. Don't worry about it.
Anyway, he woke up on the beach and opened up to a beautiful pale-faced woman. Marguerite Folkart embraced Steve because she thought, he would be a great leader. Turns out his only thought on vampire politics was, why can't everyone just get along and surf,
Dude, if Damon becomes like a surfer bro later on, like just because he just needs to chill out for the rest of eternity, like, would you be okay with that?
Next character if you die. Marguerite eventually gave up on her unpromising pupil, but over the last few years, Steve has actually begun to turn into the kind of leader she had in mind. The vampires of Long Beach, who are all just surfer types and just want to be left alone, need somebody to actually ensure that they are left alone. And Steve, as begrudgingly as possible, is filling that role.
In eternity sense, there's always going to be a moon, which always means there's always going to be waves, bruh.
Salvador was Salvador Garcia. Don Salvador. Born in the late 19th century to a small family of poor farmers in Spain. When he grew older, he joined the Anarchista movement, and then the Mano Negra, which was agitating in the countryside. I assume these are revolutionary movements. At one point, Salvador and his brothers Pablo were captured by the police and savagely beaten. Pablo was killed and Salvador almost dead when he was rescued by a mysterious figure in the Revolution named Ferdinand. Ferdinand. Salvador was too far gone to be healed, but Ferdinand gave him the option of continuing the struggle against oppression for the rest of eternity, and Salvador gladly took it. From that time on, Salvador has continued to fight, now driven by the twin passions of revenge for his brother's death and his hatred of oppression. He and Ferdinand carried on the struggle in Spain, not only against the government, but also against the Ventru and the rest of the Camarilla. During the Spanish Civil War, when the Bruja were fighting against the Ventru-controlled forces of Franco, Ferdinand was destroyed in a successful attack on the Prince of Barcelona. With his death, the Anarch movement in Spain collapsed. Salvador fled to the United States and ultimately to Los Angeles. At first, he was happy in LA. The hunting was easy, and the warm nights reminded him of his lost homeland. But gradually, it became clear that in leaving Franco's Spain for California, he had only traded one set of shackles for another. When other anarchs, such as Jerry McNeil, Jacqueline Faminant, Crispus Atticus, and Marguerite Folkart, he began to plot the rebellion. Salvador took an active hand in the revolt and is widely regarded as one of its major heroes, since he is believed to have killed the prince in single combat. After the revolt,
I was going to say, why is he okay with my character then?
Why wouldn't he be?
Cop, racist.
You haven't made it clear to him that you're a racist. You haven't made it clear to him that you're oppressive and shit. Most anarchs won't find that cool when they find out. After the revolt, Salvador was on the short-lived Revolutionary Council and was the main author of the Status Perfectus, by the way.
Really?
He later went on to write an Anarch Manifesto,
He's like
which is
Moses
still widely read. Salvador now resides among his retainers in East Los Angeles and is the de facto leader of El Hermandad. Remember those guys? I've been talking about how they're burgeoning war with the Crip Sons this whole time. Don Salvador, he's the one fighting that. He supplies equipment and riot training to many revolutionary groups in the United States and abroad. He has traveled frequently in Mexico to aid the Anarchs against the Sabbat, because the Sabbat own the shit out of Mexico. Because it's a terrible whole place with drugs and war and all that, and that can only be explained by vampiric influence and not by economic factors. Just getting out ahead of you there, Tux. Needless to say, he has become a well-known figure among kindred. Then there's a section on the Gaspars, who are Bruja, who are those two vampires who don't know any other vampires exist because a vampire broke into their remote farmhouse, sired both of them, and left. And they just haven't.
Hey, honey, the eggs taste a little weird today. I can't eat them.
I physically can't eat them.
I thought I was
Not that you're a bad cook, honey.
Oh my god. Do you have a taste for this, chicken? But not the meat, but just the blood.
Jeremy McNeil.
Oh my god.
Born in the Scottish Highlands in 1631 at a time when his clan was sided with Charles I, Jeremy rapidly rose in prestige among clansmen as a shrewd fighter. During one such skirmish, he caught the attention of a seventh-generation Bruja who felt the young Scot would be a worthy addition to the kindred clan. Clan McNeil would not accept Jeremy after his embrace, fearing him as a spawn of the devil, but he still fought for their cause by night. He also came to fight for the Irish, whom the English oppressed more than they had the Scots. He soon came to realize the English would not relinquish their rights to Ireland and that the war for freedom would be a long and bloody one. Sickened by the bloodshed, he traveled to America, only to find conflict stirring in the colonies. Taking a stand, he helped them in their fight for independence. Jeremy, like many Bruja, was forced westward to Los Angeles by venture expansion. When Don Sebastian ordered his lackeys to attack the Scotsmen, Jeremy became the focus of the Anarch outcry that led to the creation of the Free States. Yeah, Jeremy is one of the most influential Bruja active in the U.S. and the most prominent on the West Coast. It is impossible to understand the chaos that is Los Angeles without understanding him. Jeremy comes from a strong tradition of personal freedom and not imposing leadership from above. A strict, literal anarchist, he fervently believes that when people are left to themselves, the strong will survive at the expense of the weak. Eventually, he believes a cohesive society of these survivals will emerge, with each person acknowledging the equality of his brethren because it has been proved in the flame. Given that attitude, it's hardly surprising that Jeremy actually has little interest in governing. Although he cannot deny the mantle of power that has descended on him, he is far more interested in toppling the stultifying social system of the Camarilla in favor of a free and open society where a person's value is determined by her worth rather than her age. This has been a serious problem for Los Angeles because not only does Jeremy resist governing, he strongly opposes any attempts by others to do so, as much as possible. He attempts to get the kindred to work out their problems without violence to try and achieve the brotherhood which he believes them capable of. If this fails, however, he is perfectly willing to stand back and let the best vampire win. So, in other words, his main ethos is, I will interfere up into a point and then have at it because I'm actually really an anarchist.
Yeah. That hey, let's try to solve it. If we can't just kill each other, then we'll figure out after the fact.
Interesting.
Don Salvador has a sort of ill-conceived childer named Allison Mahler, who is totally rebellious to him. And she heads up a barony She does not have a barony yet, but she controls a group of vampires that is trying very, very hard to take the Anaheim barony from Tom Weaver. And they are currently hiding out in that area somewhere and like constantly, harassing
Guerrilla
him.
warfare.
Uh-huh.
Mm.
Yeah.
Gloria Martinez, which you'll recognize as one of the barons that we mentioned earlier. She just showed up one night and found Salvador in his hideaway and was like, I want to be an Anarch. And Salvador was so impressed with her finding his haven like immediately and without prompting that he accepted her as an agent. Smiling Jack is in Los Angeles right now. 10th generation Bruja, a pirate of the Caribbean from the 17th century. No one knows anything about him or who his sire is. He says that he was a pirate captain, and he acts like one too. He dresses in modern clothes, and you'll know him from the video game as the guy who teaches you how to feed. He's been an active member of the Bruja since his vampire days, fighting constantly against Aventru throughout the United States. Smiling Jack fought in the Revolt. And he's also one of the few people who is still actively attacking Camarilla places. Like, he goes out and attacks Camarilla places.
If we ever meet him, are you going to do your best Adventure Time impression with him?
No? Well, I'll try.
Or Bender Rodriguez, whatever one you prefer.
Tom Weaver, Baron of Anaheim, also a Bruja.
Tom Weaver sounds like a fucking Harry Potter character.
Tom Weaver has some history with Amethyst. That's all you know. The Bruja Idealists moved in. They're around right now. People are talking about them. They're a recent import. There's a really sad Malkavian named Bella who lives in Los Angeles, who believes with all of his heart and soul that he is Count Dracula.
Oh.
From like 1930s movies, Count Dracula.
Oh, that's sad.
Other kindred play along just enough to not shatter his illusion, so that they can laugh at him behind his back.
Aww. Oh, that's why he's called Bella.
Is that like all the major players, or are there more?
I'm going through and I'm making sure to only mention the people that you would have learned about at Elysium.
Yeah, okay.
The twin sisters Toreador, who control that barony out of their mansion. Mm-hmm. They were Toreadors, and they survived the Anarch Revolt by being too uninteresting to kill. They are super old, like they were sired super old.
Ugh, yeah, that's
rough. They are like from like 200 years ago, and they kind of have this like psycho thing going on where their father died and they've been dressed in funeral garb ever since.
Fucking goth as fuck.
Like they're in this constant state of mourning.
Daddy issues.
Hell yeah.
Damn.
I dig it.
Really? I think that's fucking weird, man.
They're just like, how goth can we make these characters? They're constantly mourning their dead father. they never took off their funeral clothes. Like, that's pretty fucking
They
dope.
live in an ancient Victorian
They
house.
live in an ancient decaying mansion. And they're twins that were sired super old.
If vampires were like, street kids, right? We would be told by our sires not to go near that house. Like...
Luis Fortier, as you'll recall, is one of the major players who owns a major section of LA, and he is a Ventru. So how then can he be an Anarch?
I mean, it sounds like anyone can be an Anarch. You just got to give up.
Well, right, but Ventru especially.
Or maybe he sees an opportunity to make his own profit, I guess. I mean, that's what it's about, right? LA is all about, like... I don't know, is LA in the porn industry in World of Darkness or not really? Because if that's the case, then I imagine that he would be like King Dingaling controlling that empire.
He was a commander of soldiers.
Okay, maybe not.
He was a commander of soldiers during when the French controlled a large portion of America.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this whole story here about how he encountered a Indian village with the intent to slaughter it. Then a shaman cast a weird spell, Sin Eater maybe, and a beautiful young woman appeared. Being, as it says here, being above all other things French to the core of his being, he could not resist the beautiful woman.
Even if it was a magical spell?
The lovely woman danced around and dazzled the soldier and then beckoned him to follow her into the woods. And in a trance, he got up and went to her small copse of trees beyond the camp. There, she stepped out of her dress and stood before him, her skin translucent and pale. When Lewis came to his senses, it was still night. The young one was gone. He was naked, and he was dead, and he was a vampire.
And a Ventru.
Yeah, the hunger struck him with the force of a cannonball at close range. He was alone and naked in the woods of Canada with a ravaging need he barely understood.
I woke up naked, thirsty as fuck. Well, what's a man to do but feed on his bras?
Record scratch. Yeah, that's me. I bet you're wondering how I got here.
Lewis eventually found his way to the West Coast and was a major player underneath Don Sebastian, the bad guy who used to own LA. But it never sat right with him, the whole Camarilla thing, because he had been raised in France after the French Revolution, right? So he just didn't like this sort of shit. When Jeremy McNeil was savagely beaten, sparking the revolt, he was the only mainstream, not Anarch person to speak out against it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why the revolt accepted him. It was also his betrayal of the Camarilla that allowed them to make such a decisive blow during the revolt, because he gave up a lot of havens and etc. He converted during the revolt. So that's Fortier. And that's why there's a Ventru in the Anarchs.
Fair.
Does he control the porn industry? That question went unanswered for me.
Someone does, but not him.
Really? The most business-minded vampire in all of LA.
So there's one other NPC that we're going to talk about, because I am running out of time, unfortunately. If we had more time, we could go through the whole list.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to give you time to ask those questions, which you haven't asked. That is Muhammad Al-Muslim, the guy who controls...
Oh, the guy that doesn't like us.
The guy who controls the Crypt Sons, the Crypts, because World of Darkness is really...
Stereotypical.
Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
Right. He first appeared in LA scene shortly after the Siege of LA. So he's a very recent addition. So just after the Rodney King riots. He claimed to have fought against the Black Hand during the siege and attracted a large coterie of admirers. The Black Hand is like the SS of the Sabbat, for the record. So he claimed to be fighting against their special operatives when he showed up.
Got it.
He sleeps in a crypt in a mausoleum, and it seems to be a demonstration of it. It seems to be something that he has to do for some reason.
Wait, no.
No. Yeah, no. No,
Okay.
no. He has to do it. It's probably a dementation, but that's where his gang got their name. That's where the Crips come from.
Oh,
is that
fuck you, World of Darkness. Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yep. Muhammad comes from Chicago.
Chicago.
He's extremely ambitious. He's always looking for more territory. He's got a very aggressive stance about anarchy and all of this stuff. He's always like shouting at the top of his lungs that more needs to be done, that this isn't acceptable.
He really likes Doritos too, right?
He's very militant. No. There is one thing about
Oh, really? Because I figured he would with that big chip on his shoulder.
Ha! There's one.
Get out.
There is.
Get out. Leave.
There's one big thing about Muhammad al-Muslim that you need to know, which is that nobody knows his clan.
What?
Okay, that is so weird. I'll just mute Rick.
There we go.
That was so weird. Alright. Your audio's fucked up, Records?
Hello?
Okay, that's
There
better.
it
What
is.
the fuck did you do, man?
When I stepped away, I put my headset down where I always do, but for some reason this time it was too short and yanked the cord out.
Oh.
Okay, that's
so it
super
probably turned on the webcam mic.
Because you know what? You know what happened? It sounded like you muted it, and then all of a sudden we heard you perfectly from the other side of the room. We're like,
Yeah, I'm assuming if it like ripped it out, it probably like Zoom was like, oh, okay, webcam, turn
All
on.
right, so we got 10 minutes to ask additional questions. You
All
have
right,
okay.
3 super additional questions that you can dig around with.
first question I have.
Yep.
I would have looked for someone who knows anything about La Sombra.
La Sombra, period?
Yeah, like someone potentially who has
Sure.
knowledge. and-
Muhammad al-Muslim, what you will hear from somebody else is Muhammad al-Muslim, from his claims of fighting the Black Hand is almost entirely La Sombra.
Okay,
So
but he
even though he hates you,
yeah.
he knows the most about La Sombra of anybody in the Anarch Free States, bar none.
Yeah.
What is the likelihood of him talking to me about that?
What is the likelihood of you sucking his dick? No, I mean it's how many favors are you willing to get him just to like you, and then to reveal what he knows about La Sombra? You know,
Yeah.
if you would learn a lot,
I
from
probably
Muhammad
would.
al-Muslim.
Yeah.
but it would be a long road.
Yeah.
All right, you have 2 questions left. Tux, you have 3 questions left.
So wait, there was no one else? Like literally no one else?
No one else knows a damn thing about La Sombra. They're Sabbat. They're secretive. They're the secret, spooky SS of the Sabbat.
Yeah. Probably playing right into your predictions and your hands. I would like to know more about Tom Weaver's history with Amethyst.
Tom Weaver's history with Amethyst. Sure
You are
thing.
such a basic bitch. It is crazy. You're just
Yes.
like, no one gonna touch my amethyst.
Well, because it was super vague. Like history with Amethyst is that like a bad history? Is it a good history?
He gave her the good dickings, man. Nothing.
that could be true.
I mean,
which is fine. I'm just
you could give her the good dickings if you tried.
It got
hard
me
enough.
curious. It got me curious. Like did they
Maria
have, like, a
is
huge
thirsty
fight?
as fuck. Yeah.
This is also true.
They touch butts.
Mm-hmm.
Tom and Amethyst, when they both came to LA for the first time, stayed at the Taste together. Immediately afterwards, Tom became the Baron of Anaheim and Amethyst became the Baron of Santa Ana.
Are they like connected territories?
Yeah.
They had a Romeo and Juliet fucking story, I bet.
Well, no. I mean, they showed up at the Taste both neutral. Then suddenly they both claimed large territory for themselves.
Did they work together and then separate them?
They're not together. They're not working together. I mean, the rumors are, that there's something there. That's really suspicious. But like people what the person that you will ask this to and is a gabber and a gossiper and who you're getting it from, he'll say, well, Tom is always voting like however Amethyst votes. I think he's got, puppy dog eyes for her. But, I don't know anything about why they both just have, like, I don't know, it's probably a thing. Like, let's go claim territory for ourselves, talking at the taste. Like, woo, let's do it. And then they did. And that's probably all that's there. All right. 2 more questions each. And I have 6 minutes.
Okay. Well, I guess realistically, like, I guess I want to know more specifically about he's a soldier. Damien's a soldier, right? Like that's
sure.
That's the sort of Anarch, the thing that I have, the archetype, whatever we called it. So yep. I'm looking specifically at, like, you mentioned a lot of things about Don Salvador, and is there anything that I could have him like give Damien in secret that no one else might have known, not so much in secret but in confidence?
About what? About him? About
him, about his, like, what he wants to do, like how I can help him, that sort of things.
The thing is that Salvador was
like, whatever I would need to do for him to.
Here's the answer that you'll get.
Okay.
Here's the problem. In the legends and myths of the revolt, Don Salvador is this hero who led the attack against the prince by himself. But after that, he wrote the Status Perfectus. He wrote the Anarch Manifesto. He's a philosopher and a preacher now. And he's running El Hermandad, and they're opposing the Crypt Sun's rise to power. And he's big and friendly, but he's not attacking them. Like, he's just there as a bulwark against their aggressive expansion. So
what I'm saying is, if the guy needs a fucking dog, like a fucking, like, a guard dog or whatever the fuck you want to call it, like,
he doesn't, is the thing. Like, that's not the guy to ask. Mm-hmm. He's now in this big peace, and I want there to be peace in the Anarch state. It's the same thing with McNeil. They both were like these central revolt figures, but now both of them are trying to not fight anymore, trying to keep fighting to the minimum amount. Mm-hmm. So they're not the kind who need an agent to go off and do stuff. What he'll say is that if you really, really want to go off and have a cause and be a soldier, go join up with Smiling Jack, because he still is, like, without any of the assistance of the Anarch state, by himself, he is still running campaigns against cities that are held by the Camarilla. Like, if that's the kind of soldier you want to be, then you can go be that kind of soldier.
Interesting, but that's diametrically opposed to working within the PCs. You know what I mean? Like, that's the only problem with something like that.
It's the difference between you say I'm a police officer or I'm a soldier. They are two different things.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, being a vampire, there is no concept as being a police officer, right? So, you know what I mean? Like, at least for what a police officer is supposed to be. Yeah. I mean, maybe there is, maybe there isn't, but so far
Tux, let's get your next question.
Are there any vampires involved with my family's thing?
Do you care to elaborate?
Your family is essentially, I mean, do you mind me saying this?
That's fine.
Your family, one side of your family essentially runs the Mexican mafia, the larger organized crime of Mexican, like the drug trade, like, up in California. If there were any vampires in that organization, they would be Sabbat.
Yo, did you get turned by one of your fucking family members?
Oh my god.
That's what someone tells you. It's like you're like, hey, so I know that the Mexican mafia is involved in workings up here. Would any how much vampiric influence do we have over there? And someone's like, us? None, but maybe the Sabbat. Like,
And then
they
you look
control
over
the
at
Mexican
Damien and
mafia.
he's like having a drink with the surfer dude, and you're just like, shit.
Fuck.
See,
Oh my god.
All right, last question, Dave.
Okay, I'm tempted to go with Smiling Jack, but at the same time, I think
Could get more out of McNeil as well.
yeah, but also I kind of want to like talk to the surfer dude, like because
Surfer dude?
because I just see a whole like character arc of Damien chilling the fuck out eventually. You know what I mean? Like I do see that happening.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know if Surfer Bro is the way I want to go. Like, maybe go with Tux first. Like, Tux,
All right, Tux, do you have your last question ready?
I'm a bit broken now, but
Just as a thing for like, I will still allow Braden to ask questions if he watches the YouTube video, and we'll probably do the top of the next episode. But some major things that maybe you guys want to know more about, like you can ask questions about the Lupins, you can ask questions about specific clans, primogens, like people who aren't here. Open-ended questions like, hey, what's the biggest rumor going around right now? It doesn't, but I encourage it to be something that you definitely want to know before you leave Elysium. And since I have literally no minutes left, if neither of you can think of anything, I'm happy to put these last questions off.
I'll go with
sure. I'll save it for next time.
So here's the thing: if I say
Tux is saving his question for next time. You want to do that?
No, I'll go. Like I'm gonna say, is it a possibility for me to contact people later on? Like if I want to talk to the surfer dude in character in games, that a possibility?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Then I want to try and talk to McNeil and get some more.
What do you want from McNeil? Do you want more? Do you want to hear, like, are you trying to learn more about him, or what is it like? Because what is the thing here?
Well, okay, so I've been told by Don Salvador that...
do you want to learn more about the Barony of Angels and how it works? Like, what is...
I want to learn about specifically where I could fit in his retinue.
That has nothing to do with Elysium.
Okay.
Like, Elysium is about learning about these people through gossiping and socializing.
Okay.
This isn't about, I go up to this person and get favors from them.
Okay.
So, like, what is it that you want to learn that you don't know as far as a piece of information?
Shit, man. Like, God, that's such a hard question to ask.
Do you want to save it for next time, like Tux?
No,
and then
I want to be able to stew on the information, right? So, tell me more.
But you could also stew on the question. And then have a really good one.
I won't have a good question. That's the problem.
Okay.
Can I get
All right.
more information about, like, what he's doing now?
McNeil?
Yeah.
McNeil has been working very, very closely with Don Salvador in recent months to just try and end the gang fighting, because it started to pick back up again. In the wake of the siege of Los Angeles, which was the 70s, the Anarchs have only just started to build back up, and now as soon as they feel like they're far enough removed from that terrible event, they're just fighting again. McNeil wants an Anarch state that has no concept of leaders. He doesn't want barons. He doesn't want baronies. He wants everyone to be free and open, and he can't conceptualize that that's not possible, and so he's struggling every single night to try and make it a reality. And that includes being assaulted on all sides by Camarilla, Sabbat, Kui Jin now, or coming into his territory, and he gave a really reluctant speech and stood up to her. But that isn't the kind of thing he would have wanted to do, right? He doesn't want to be that figurehead. but he has to be because he's the only vampire that everybody respects from the revolt because he was the guy who got beaten up, right? Don Salvador has all his cred from being the guy who single-handedly took on the prince. So these people have, Fortier has all his cred for being the guy who betrayed the Camarilla and made the revolt possible. Like, these people are in their positions of powers as a direct result of the revolt, and anything less just doesn't stack up. It doesn't give you enough. So he has to be this guy, and he doesn't want to be this guy. That's like the main thing about McNeil. Everybody knows that he doesn't want to be leader, but everybody would follow him in a heartbeat. That's what everyone will tell you. And in fact, they'll even say it wistfully, like, oh, he doesn't even want to be leader. Doesn't that just make him the best leader ever? Like,
I mean, for an Anarch, I guess that's true, right? But
right, so it's like they also, there's also quite a lot of talk that is in the vein of he was a 16th century Scottish rebel. So, William fucking Wallace. I wouldn't want to fight him, would you? He has that claymore still, which is a fantastic weapon for fighting vampires.
Maybe I need to get me a claymore. Anyway, okay.
He probably keeps more than one. Have you learned something there, or is that just me restating stuff we've already sort of breached on?
It's kind of restating things. Like, I didn't really learn anything more than, he's the reluctant hero that the city needs, but he doesn't want. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's what
are you looking for?
I'm looking for an in, man. An in. Like, I want to hear something that, maybe like something that needs doing or whatever. Like, he sounds like he wants to like eliminate the gangs, but he doesn't know the way to do it, and like it sounds like he doesn't want violence either. So like, as far as I'm concerned, he's wanting something that can't be done, but at the same time, I'm sure he has ideas on it. Like, I'm sure he has like something he wants to try, but he doesn't want to have connected to him, or
No, he's not that type of guy. Like, literally, that is the problem, and I'm telling you this. He wants something that is not possible. What he wants isn't possible, and he is going to struggle in vain forever to achieve it. There is maybe some type of anarch government that can exist, but it has to have a government, and he just expects it not to. And vampires, their beasts and their clan weaknesses literally will not allow them to coexist without some sort of structure. So what he wants is impossible. But no one else will tell you that because anarchists are going to believe that as well. But you'll hear a couple people say, that's impossible. Like, I like the system we have now. It's way more anarchy based. There's way more freedom. There's a lot more like, I can be a baron. Anybody can be a baron. And really, isn't that like the spirit of democracy? This is the key difference between McNeil and a lot of the anarchs in LA. A lot of the anarchs in LA are anarchs because they grew up on the ideals of democracy that have sprung up in the last couple hundred years. McNeil grew up before even that, and his concept of anarchy isn't democracy. It's actual anarchy.
Yeah.
So there's plenty of anarchs who are happy to be like, let's have a democratic government, right?
Yeah.
And that would be far enough removed from the Camarilla. But these older anarchs are like, they didn't even conceptualize democracy. They were before even that. So they can only think of tearing the entire system down.
I have one final question that was more related to yesterday's episode more than anything. When I did that stupid speech thing that I was blissfully unaware would have the effect that it did, what did that actually? What was the resonation of that? Like, you know what I mean?
Like, as I recall, you basically said, I ain't fucking doing that because we're anarchs. And it's like, yeah, like, you show her. Like, she was an outsider who doesn't understand anarchs, and then you spoke. And you were like, here is an anarch ideal, fist pound on the table, that you don't understand. And we do, and we're anarchs, and fuck you. And that's basically what you did. And so tons of people like you now. Like, that's what I have to say about that. Elysium is absolutely the place to make a show and get your rep up. And like, almost nobody cares you're a La Sombra anymore.
Okay.
because they genuinely believe that you're an anarchist.
Okay, and did that have any, like, did that turn the tide in terms of, like, people, like, if I go up to people now, are they going to be more inclined to, like, have a conversation? Like, you know, is the only reason I was able to talk to people at thing because I said that shit? Like,
yeah, to some extent, like, especially after being a La Sombra, like, you probably would have been a bit of a pariah. But yeah, no, rep is everything in World of Darkness, and not even just the rep that you buy with merits, but like the rep that you gain narratively is everything.
Yeah.
If you gain enough rep, then you can walk up to McNeil and say, I want to help run the police department, and he will have to say yes. Like, if you have enough social standing to command that position, and that's what you want, and he doesn't want to do it anyway, then he just says yes. So I have to call it here now. We'll ask more questions with Braden and Tux at the top of the next episode. This is also a perfectly good place to let Dave and the audience know that Tuesday can't come back to the game probably for months. So we're going to have to start looking to actually replace her slot. We're not going to kill off her character or anything, just in case she does come back in 3 or 4 months. But in the meantime, this is a perfect arc to introduce some new blood, literally. So Dave, get on that if you can, please.
Yeah, just do it. It's super easy.
I mean,
well, he's the person. He's been talking with somebody.
There are people who want to play. It's just about, like, I don't know.
The slot's open, and we need to fill it now. So you can tell those people that.
Yeah.
And hopefully that's enough. I have to go.
Okay.
Anyways. Like right the fuck now. So please join us again on Monday. I'm sorry it's gonna fuck up the cameras, but I literally have to leave. Bye.
All right, Tux, my man.
Yep.
Where can people find you?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for hanging out with us. I'm Tux. You can find me other places at Tuxerdamus. I hope you enjoyed our little foray into the politics of our LA vampires and stuff. I liked it because finding out more about the stuff and having the questions was pretty cool. And then I still have one more, so I'll be thinking about that. And join us Monday for more vampire action.
All right, guys. Thanks very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this little LA Confidential. I'm still sticking with that name. It's a good one. I'm really interested in finding out more about the Surfer Bros.
That was great to learn.
I don't know, man. I don't know. Like,
yeah, it's a bunch of vampires. They're just surfer dudes.
Yeah, I mean, what could go wrong, right? So tomorrow is the first play episode of Surge, which is our Shadowrun Anarchy game. Speaking about anarchy, right? So that'll be a very interesting game. I actually can't wait for that. It's going to be pretty good. And yeah, I think that'll be the last stream of the week because, very adult things will happen to me, at least, over the next week. So then we'll be back, I guess, Monday with LA at Night after that. So, yeah. That's pretty much it, guys. Thank you very much for watching. If you haven't already done so, consider following the channel. And if you're feeling saucy, subscribe. Help us grow. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Have a good one. Bye-bye.